This presentation is about housing and housing first, and the cooperation between housing companies and the municipality in Odense. And we will try to talk a little bit about the opportunities and barriers seen from perspective in Odense. When we started up, we've been working together quite some years already, the housing companies, public housing, non-profit housing companies, and the municipality. We found out that there might be even bigger perspective in our cooperation. Therefore, we, for a little bit more than 10 years ago, made a series of meetings where we tried to find out what kind of challenges had we, and were some of them common, and if we had any challenges, were there also some solutions. And it showed, when we started at once, that we had quite some common challenges. We had some challenges with people and staff with their feeling of security in the residential area, and also how, if you were worried, how should you deal with the worries, and how should we deal with the behavior. This was a meeting between the staff in the municipality, it was the staff in the housing companies, and even the board in the municipality, some that tried to describe what they felt were the things that were having a position in their daily life.
Yeah, so you may ask the question, why is it important to the social housing companies to interact and cooperate with the city? And the short answer is, it's in our DNA. It's in our purpose to contain all kinds of people from different kinds of social layers, and that purpose also have has different perspectives. For instance, what do we do when you have, for instance, a homeless person living in an area where the homeless may have a certain kind of behavior that you're not used to see or deal with in the residential area? And another perspective is that some neighbors may also feel sorry for the person and want to make sure that the person gets help. So there are many perspectives in trying to working with homelessness. But the many years of work together have also created a sort of mutual understanding and culture. So we now are able to talk and discuss difficult situations concerning housing the homeless.
And we can say if we have a common attitude towards a lot of things, then we even can create the possibility to make solutions so people don't get homeless, because there is quite a number of people which we don't know, which housing companies knows, that has quite some problems, and how can we get contact with these persons? And that's and even the companies, they have a very, where should they go, all that kind of situations we try to deal in the way when we described it that time. Today I would say it's a matter about a common culture. So we try to make a lot of practical solutions towards this kind of things and prevent homelessness as well. Next, please. And how the housing is the key point. And how do we in the municipal housing sector allocate the housing? We could say, according to the legislation, then the public non-profit housing companies, almennyttige boligforeninger, it's called in Danish, it was called the same in Sweden old days, have the obligation to give up to each fourth free apartment to the municipality. But what we choose to do in Odense was to say we will not have each fourth apartment automatically, because that doesn't give any sense, because very often we would get offered apartments which we shouldn't use, and therefore we had to send it back. Therefore, we have the way we are handling it in Odense is that we, every one time a month, has a meeting between the municipality and the people who are in charge of the rental office in the big housing companies, where we tell what kind of need we have, and the housing companies delivers the apartment to us. What we also try to offer in the municipality is that the apartment or the office that's working with housing allocation, we are specialized both in the social area but also in the housing affairs. So we try to make a bigger understanding inside the municipality on what kind of terms do the housing company works from and what kind of legislation do the housing company works from. So we as municipality, in the municipality, works as a kind of ambassadors for the housing companies, and try to be sure that we only help the people who can't solve their housing problems alone. Today it's so effective that we, after when a person is put on the housing list in the municipality, we will allocate or find a house in 1 to 2 months. Then the housing company will deliver a house for us in very short time, 1 to 2 months. Next, please. Yeah.
Sustainable residential areas. It's important to make sure that our residential areas stay sustainable, and also that we try to stay ahead of things. Diversity is a very good thing, but it can also challenge the coherence in the area. So as a social housing company, it's important to talk and also discuss the diversity issue as well with the residents, and also make sure that the communication channels are working to maintain a certain kind of respect for and in the area. So it's continuously we have to work on the dialogue.
Yeah, and what we do in Odense, which we did the last 10 years, is we're working from the idea on the housing first. So we believe quite a lot and work from the position that people should have their own apartment, but when they get their apartment, they should have possibility to get the right individual support they need in that situation. We gave around 500 persons their own apartment, and 80% of them still have their apartment here 10 years after. We reduced the bailiff evictions. We get a little bit more to that. And because we managed to have this kind of very good tight cooperation between the housing companies and the municipality, then last year, the alderman in our area and the housing companies, the directors from the housing company, made a housing guarantee for homeless citizens in Odense. This housing guarantee has been fulfilled now in nearly 2 years. So people, well, after they're put on the list, then they have to wait maximum 3 months to get their own apartment. So we try to avoid long-term homelessness this way. Next, please. This is an example on how we cooperate. For 10 years ago, we realized for the housing company, it's very expensive to this bailiff evictions. For us, it's also quite an expensive thing, but it's also something that's have huge personal costs for the persons who lose their apartment. What we did to start up was we were sitting together, the bailiff office, the municipality, and then the housing companies. It's not only one company, and tried all of us to see what do we do. When do we send a letter? When do the housing company do something? When do the bailiff office do something? When do the municipality do something? Some of it wasn't done the most effective way if we look at it in one order. So we tried to make a kind of systematic thinking in it. Something when people from the housing company said, why do we write this in the letter? It could be more reasonable to write this and this. Then we remade our letters to the persons. And all this focus we had across offices made a huge fall in bailiff evictions. A lot of this bailiff evictions is not people who were homeless. It was people who lost their apartment and then they got homeless. So therefore, it's rather interesting to reduce the bailiff evictions, because that way it's also a way of reducing new homelessness.
Yeah. And also seen from the social housing company's point of view, it's important because our board, all of the boards from the housing companies decided to make a financial a decision to pay for financial counseling amongst the housing companies. So we give the tenants who risk to get an eviction an offer where they can be contacted by a financial advisor who can make a budget for them, so they are so they can pay their rent first and not perhaps some other bills. So it's important for us as well as that they stay in the apartment.
Yeah, next please. This cooperation means also that we have a lot of different, it made that we had a lot of different other things that we're doing together. One of the results is, for example, that we every 3 months made a meeting between specific offices in the municipality, the police, and the housing companies in an area. We put up the city in four groups. And this meeting, we're talking about how do we see, we meet every 3rd month, and this meeting, we talk about what do we see in the area. Very often, it shows that some of the problems we have, we can solve them in advance. And it also gives, because we have this network, it also gives the possibility that we get told when because the staff from the housing company knows much more about what's going on in the areas than that would do. And therefore, they're worries about certain persons. We have the possibility to help the persons earlier. Another thing was that we heard from the housing companies that felt it was very difficult to find out who they should contact in the municipality. Therefore, we made one contact number, so or email address. So if somebody has something they're worried about in the housing area, they can put it to the municipality towards this email address, and then we find out who is working with this person and try to make focus on how can we help or do something about what's going on. We also have a lot of, there's been made a lot of papers with strategies and cooperation papers and I don't know what, dialogue meetings where we try to create products, but also create policies and strategies.
Yes, thank you. We have many kind of meeting places or forums, and some are strategic and some are more operational. And I think the strength lies in that the housing companies are seen both as a strategic partner in developing the city by building affordable homes, but also as a public service provider for the city. So it's kind of like a contract with the community that both parts are obliged to fulfill and also maintain by talking together, by maintaining the common culture, the common understanding of how we work between or in the residential areas where we have common problems and common solutions.
Next, please. We've been working from the idea on Housing First in 10 years. And now, last year, our politicals made a strategy for Housing First in Odense, and they also made a strategy for the inclusive city. This gives other things we have to look at. We have to look at how we can provide affordable housing. And we also have to maintain housing as well as reduce bailiff evictions. It's a part of it. But if we're talking about housing first, then it's important to say one thing is to get an apartment. One thing is to be sure that it's possible for the homeless, former homeless, to get the right support which they need. But we also need that the environment around them is secure for them. Therefore, we're talking a lot about the inclusive city, that this should be a city where they're living over 200,000, and it should be a city where there's space for everybody, even if you have different kinds of behavior. So we think that's a kind of the other leg in Housing First, is to talk about the spaciousness in the city and to be inclusive. So we are more comfort about being different. Yes. Please, next one. If we to put some more numbers in it, because we can talk quite a lot about this, and then where do they get the apartment from? How many apartments are there? I have put in some numbers which we got from a report that was made last year. This is in Danish, but I think a lot of you can read Danish. The first column at the top, it shows how many persons we gave an apartment, their age, and things like that. This is not only homeless. This is total amount of social housing. 1,677 persons, 1,754 persons, and 1,828 persons. The next one shows how many apartments is there in the social housing area in Odense. In Odense, it's something like 25% of the total amount of housing in the city. Nationally, it's also something like 25% of the total amount of apartments and housing in Denmark that's delivered by the social non-profit housing companies. In Odense, we have 21,800, nearly 22,000, I think it's 22,000 today, apartments, which is delivered by the housing companies. Plus, they also have some special youth apartments, which is for people who are studying or in special social needs, where there's 2,600 apartments. If we look at, this is what they have on apartments, how many people are moving from the apartments. And if we look at that, then there was 2,600 apartments free. This is for in 18, I think. And there was 158 apartment for youngsters free this year. Next, please. And as I told earlier, then we can have up to E4 according the legislation for this area. And if we look at this, this is also about the economy, cheap apartments. If we look at this, then we used if we make a calculation where we say 16, 17, we used 165 apartments in totally, and this will give 4.5% of the free apartments we're using. We are not using at all the 25%. It's also something we have to be very much aware about. This shouldn't be a way of getting an apartment fast to get around the waiting list in the housing area. This shall be the people who can't solve their own housing problem. 4.5% we helped. And there was made a new report from Lars Benjamin, which was published for a month ago, 14 days ago, which shows that it's called Housing First in Odense, which shows that we, in the period 2011 to 18, gave 423 persons their own home. And today, 418, 80%, still have their own home. Yes. Next, please. And if we look at what do we need in the future on housing? As I said, for homeless, something like around 50 persons a year. We can see that from the last 10 years. It's something like, you can see just in the figures 523, something about 50 persons a year. But there's also other persons who shall have an apartment and can't solve their own home housing problem. We should have used something between 117 to 119 homes a year, inclusive youth housing. 10 to 20% is youth housing, so around 150 apartments for family or single persons. This shall be primarily 2 to 3 rooms apartments with a rent between 2,500 to 4,500 kroners and a size between 50 to 80 square meters. This has some meaning concerning the housing support. But still, we can do that today. But I could imagine that it's going to be more and more difficult in the future, because the support from the public, when public support is not raising, and the apartment is getting more and more expensive, for example, because they have to renovate it.
Yeah.
So we need affordable housing.
We need affordable housing, and it is a key solution to housing first issues.
Yeah.
And still, at the present day, we have enough, as Tom says, but as we continuously renovate our buildings, it will increase the rent naturally. Even though it's not a large rent, it will still be perhaps too much for a homeless person or a family who doesn't have so much money. It will still be cheap, but in a normal context. So we need, as a common goal, to make sure that we build and provide affordable homes, and more important, also that the affordable homes are placed different kinds of places in the city. So we not create a building only for homeless. We have to build them and make sure that they are in residential areas that, so to speak, can consume it.
And it's very difficult to build affordable housing, because at a certain price with the people who are working and with the place where you have to build it. So there's a kind of thing which I know there's political focus on in Denmark as well, but in a lot of countries. Let's hope that we find out of one another solution, because if we can't perform to find the affordable housing, then there will be more homeless. So this is a key factor, to find the decent apartments and to make it for the right price.